Welcome, everyone, to tonight's webinar, Future Hindsights, Author Talk with Guy Tall. We are grateful to all of you for coming tonight to help us celebrate the release of Guy's most recent ebook, Future Hindsights, shockingly enough. So excited to see so many of the names we recognize and see some new ones too. So thanks for all for joining us. We are so glad you're here. We have an exciting discussion for you planned for this evening. For those of you I've not yet met, hi, I'm Colleen. Some people like to call me Bubbles. I'm a photographer, writer, speaker, and instructor from Chandler, Arizona. I am also Guy's director of fun, that is self-appointed, and the publisher under the name Analemma Press for Guy's Future Hindsight ebook, and maybe another title you might be familiar with, Another Day Not Wasted. I'm going to serve as what Guy likes to call the chief instigator, your moderator for tonight's talk. Guy and I have been friends since 2012 and have shared many a campfire, long drive, pizza, tater tot, Navajo taco. And one of our favorite pastimes when we get together is to wander and to wonder and to banter and philosophize about living authentically and living creatively. Among many other things, what I especially appreciate about Guy is his incredible ability to learn, to process his many readings, to find and share incredible quotes, and turn his ideas into inspiration for all of us. And I know that I might be slightly biased, but I do believe he is one of the most talented and insightful thinkers and artists of our time. A lot of people may not know this, but he also holds a certificate in fun. Tonight, during this 90-minute-ish session, Guy is going to introduce his latest title and read selected passages in hopes it helps you gain deeper insight into how the attitude of future hindsight can enrich your own photography, your creative work, even if you're not a photographer, and hopefully life. We are also going to answer as many of your questions as time allows. We both thank those who submitted questions during the registration process. This will surprise absolutely no one, but we received so many amazing questions. So thank you. Due to time constraints, we're not going to be able to get to all of them tonight. For this conversation, we're going to focus it on philosophy, conceptual topics, and the creative journey, not just in photography, but in life as well. So we aren't going to be covering any how-to or any technical topics here. If you have any additional questions as we go, let me make sure the Q&A button should be at the bottom. There it is. I just enabled it. If you have any additional questions, please put them in the Q&A box, not the chat. You guys can chat amongst yourself, but it tends to be a lot when we're focused on what we're trying to do here in the discussion. I will be monitoring the Q&A, and and I will ask Guy those questions if they address what we're talking about in the conversation. And if not, we still value them, and we will keep all of the submitted questions, and Guy hopes to address some of them in other forms, perhaps in a future blog post or maybe a future talk. So if you aren't already following Guy on social media and his blog, be sure that you are, so you can catch those follow-up conversations and, of course, more. So with all of that logistical stuff out of the way, let's all give a big round of applause to Guy. Congratulations on your book, Guy, and
Thank you very much.
welcome to the party.
The party. Excellent.
Yeah.
Well,
Thanks
thank
for
you
being here.
very
Do you
much.
want to,
Yeah.
would you care to introduce yourself for those who may not know you?
You mean I got to follow that now? Holy cow. Well, thank you very much, Colleen. That was an awesome introduction. And for those of you that haven't caught it, the great music that we started off with, Colleen created that music, which is pretty amazing. Um, so, of course, thank you everybody for being here. Introduce myself, huh? Well, I am a biological human being with a natural intelligence classic. Running on 57-year-old hardware. I'm going to try to do my best. Um, some of you probably know me from workshops, from the many, many articles that I've written for various magazines, from my blog, for my photography. I've tried to be very active in photography for longer than I'd care to remember. But as some of you also know, if you've read my recent books and some of my recent posts, I'm not just a photographer. Been fortunate, very fortunate to live a pretty interesting life, and have a lot of other interests. And I hope to weave some of that into my writings, into my philosophy. And I just love sharing that. I love answering questions about that. I've learned a lot of things that have made my life considerably more inspiring, meaningful, exciting, adventurous. A lot of things that I'm grateful for, and I'll be the first to acknowledge that a lot of it was pure dumb luck, but hopefully some of it as a matter of attitude that I would be able to share in my writings. I live in Utah in a very remote, rural place where it's extremely hot right now. But anyway, I guess that would do it for introduction, huh?
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for that. Do you want to start off with a short reading from your book?
Sure. Well, let me just
Spoiler
talk a little
alert,
bit.
Michael. Wait, spoiler alert, Michael.
Yeah, cover your ears, Michael. Yeah. Um, so I'm going to skip the part where I introduce what future hindsight is, but I'll just tell you what I mean by it. Is future hindsight is an attitude that I first mentioned in my book, Another Day Not Wasted, which Colleen's company, Analemma, also published. And what I mean by future hindsight is to consider, as a matter of course, as a general attitude towards life, to always consider what you in your future later years might regret having done or not having done, making choices right now with the courage, with that attitude of having your future self not regret anything that you've done, or in the language that I put it in, and they not wasted. Never look back, feel like you have wasted your life, no matter what it is that you do. And I know I've had periods in my life where that has happened, where for several years I worked for different jobs or lived in different places that were very unsatisfying to me, and suffered some deep existential crisis as a result. And I realized that I was not willing to keep letting my very limited number of conscious living moments go to waste. But since we are here to talk about photography, I picked one passage to start with from the book, and this is from an article titled "Means and Ends," which is near the beginning of the book, page 13, if you happen to have it. So here goes. Aaron Siskan wrote, "Photography is more than a means of recording the obvious. It is a way of feeling, of touching, of loving." I agree with him, but with a caveat. I think his words become more truthful if we replace both instances of is with can be. Photography is not a way of feeling, touching, or loving. Photography can be a way of feeling, touching, or loving. Photography can be a way of engaging with and responding to the world, learning, exploring, discovering, creating, and eliciting heightened states of mind, flow, contentment, pride, nostalgia, and awe, to name just a few. But it is none of these things by default. They must ensue from the photographer's consciously chosen attitude, dedication, seriousness, and openness. Likewise, photography is not art. Photography can be art. Photography is not a documentary medium. Photography can be a documentary medium. Photography is neither a private right nor a social activity. Photography can be a private right or a social activity. Photography is not contemplative. Photography can be contemplative. Photography is not a creative outlet, but photography can be a creative outlet. Instead of proclaiming photography is and assuming that what follows will occur inevitably from the simple mechanics of operating a camera by saying photography can be, we recognize that what follows is not guaranteed and place the responsibility for it where it belongs, with the photographer.
Excellent. Yeah, I think maybe the same could be said about life too, right?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
A lot of things it is or is not, but certainly having the choice and creating a life, creating a photography journey that you are proud of to call your own. So awesome. I mean, since you've started with that beautiful passage, why don't you give us a quick overview of the rest of the book about future hindsights? What is this book specifically about?
So as I mentioned, it starts with a quick description of what the attitude of future hindsight is. And what I wanted to do in the book is not necessarily just explain or belabor this concept or give, any specific advice on how to apply it, but I wanted it to be more, well, it is a series of essays that are more of an inner narrative, just to give readers a sense of what it's like to be in my head, to see the world through my eyes, to follow my train of thought, my stream of consciousness as it happens during some of these experiences that to me ensue from that attitude of future hindsight, to demonstrate, to give you sort of a hands-on, driver's seat view of what what this attitude has done for me, the kind of life, the kind of way of working and thinking that it has enabled me to do. So the experiences and the realization, the revelations, the thoughts that I share in this book, none of it would have been possible if it didn't dawn on me one day that I just did not want to waste my time anymore. I wanted to take my life seriously, and I wanted to make the most of my living moments, of my work, of my photography, of my thinking, of my reading, of everything that I do.
And what would you say for those who are familiar with some of your other titles? What is different about this book from your other books? What new messages are you hoping to convey with the audience?
So, actually, when I started putting the essays together, it didn't seem like it was, at least conceptually, that much different from other books until Michael Gordon, who's with us today. And thank you, Michael, for helping read and edit and comment on the book. And Michael also wrote a great foreword for the book. So Michael told me that he felt that this book felt more personal to him, that it gave more insight, I think he said, into the man himself, into me, which to me was a bit surprising because that's not how I intended it to be. But I can think of some explanation for why that is, but I think part of it is being more personal, more stream of consciousness, not just didactic, logical analysis of what I do and how I do it.
I mean, I definitely agree with Michael's assessment, and we had talked about that in when we were reviewing the book before it came out. I think the inner narrative and there's an intimacy that we haven't experienced. I think with your previous books, all of them, magnificent, of course, but this feels kind of different, and I feel like it comes through really well in your words and your flow throughout the entire ebook. I think it's the strength, honestly, of Future Hindsights. It definitely reads more personal than some of your other writings. Um, I think this just speaks to your growth and your comfort as a writer. I mean, you've been doing this for a while. So
I have. I mean, well, thank you for that. But yes, I mean, I have been doing it for a while. But as my close friends know, the last few years have been very transformative in my life with a lot of challenges that I had to overcome. So I'm assuming that had a lot to do with me feeling more emotional and more open about where life landed me after all these years of thinking and philosophizing about it.
and we are going to talk maybe a little bit more about some of those transitions and where you're at with your work and your life and in just a bit. But I do want to finish on just some of the other questions that we had around coming up with the title. How
Mhm.
did you come up with the title for Future Hindsight? Um, and what exactly does that mean? And how are you applying that to your life today?
So, as I mentioned, I first brought the concept, the term up in the book Another Day Not Wasted, having future hindsight. Because for me, I've always dreaded the idea that someday, late in life, when I no longer have the strength to keep doing what I would love to do, to look back at my life and to think, wow, I've wasted some of it, or I should have done something different, or I should have found the courage to do something else, or I should have thought about things differently. So I want to be able to look back without these regrets. That idea of regret when I can't do anything about it was honestly pretty terrifying to me. So that's where the term came from. And I actually wrote a pretty long article titled "Future Hindsight" that I meant to include in another book that ended up not making the cut. So I actually had some narrative about it, and I ended up breaking that up into some of the other essays.
Excellent. Yeah, when I read Future Hindsight as the title, it was super clever. The Sean Patrick Flannery quote came to mind, which is "Do something today that your future self will thank you for."
Absolutely. And that's true in multiple ways, but I think one that might not be obvious is one thing that your future self will probably thank you for is if you give him or her a lot of leeway, because presumably your future self will be wiser and more experienced than your present self, than your younger self. And you might want to think twice before binding that future wiser person in ways that you're
Absolutely.
not entirely sure they would appreciate. So try to leave as much freedom for them to make their own choices and to chart their own course to the extent that that's feasible.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely agree. Freedom is everything. So, our good friend Shirley Wyrock had submitted a
Oh,
question that ties to this. While you introduce the rest of us to future hindsight in Another Day Not Wasted, when did this attitude first occur to you?
that's an interesting question. The term didn't occur to me until Another Day Not Wasted, but as far as the attitude, I'd have to say there was no definitive time or event that I can think of, but I've been feeling that way and thinking in those terms, at least as far as my teenage years. And, you're getting to the personal stuff right now. I've always been an outsider and, an introvert or an autrovert. That's a term that I've learned recently that I think describes me pretty well. Uh, I've been prone to moods and depressions, and I always appreciated solitudes. And it turned out that throughout my life, I didn't realize it until much later that I actually have a form of bipolar syndrome that I just went through life not even knowing that I had. And when I finally realized that I had it, a lot of things fell into place for me. Uh, but that idea of dealing with these not always pleasant conditions, dealing with depression, dealing with a lot of contemplation, with being an outsider, not always having the social support that other people seem to enjoy, and that for me I just never really felt comfortable. I realized that a lot of that pain that caused me a lot of frustration throughout my life has also been a great gift, at least in my case, because it allowed me to learn a lot more about myself, about what makes me different. And that was sort of the idea behind my previous book, Be Extraordinary, which, be extraordinary pretty much means you are extraordinary, just be yourself. Everybody is different. Everybody has a different personality, different sensibilities, different ways of perceiving the world, different ways of learning, different things that bring meaning to your life. And embracing that and finding a way to make your life meaningful with the knowledge of who you are and what makes you different, to me has been a very powerful driving force in my life.
I mean, that takes a lot of self-awareness and a lot of evaluation and thinking. So, yeah. I mean, you've obviously endured a lot. In your last book, Be Extraordinary, you talked about the idea of becoming who you are. And this talks to this idea of pain and suffering, but also joy and fulfillment, and they all
Absolutely.
being gifts and being part of that formula, if you will. So, inquiring minds want to know, who is Guy Tall becoming in this very moment?
I would be very worried if I actually had the answer to that. But the short answer is I'm becoming myself, what that
Yeah.
turns out to be, which is another way of saying that I'm learning and discovering and creating myself constantly as I go through life, as I learn new things, as I experience new things. And so whatever becoming what I am turns out to be, I don't want to preconceive what it will be. I don't want to put any limitations on it. I don't want to assume anything, and I certainly don't want to assume that I'll become everything that I can become. So like to try different things, think also about little different things, waiting for all these aha moments of inspiration, and then just see what life brings my way.
Well, I mean, to the title, you're being extraordinary. You're being you. That's it.
Yes, but again, put that in context. By being extraordinary, I don't
I know.
necessarily being elevated relative to other people. And that's really the idea of behind the
Right.
book is I wanted it to create that tension where being extraordinary feels threatening, something to stress about. But I tie it all together. Again, sorry for the spoiler alert. At the end of the book, I tell you, you don't have to worry about being extraordinary. You already are.
You
And
already
as
are.
it turns
Right.
out, people actually invest a lot of effort and undue stress in becoming ordinary when they already are extraordinary. So in becoming
Oh,
ordinary,
isn't that the truth?
right, in trying to comply and conform with other people's expectations with things that you can easily free yourself of.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree. Okay, so we have two questions that are similar from our audience. We have one from Rebecca and one from Alan. So Rebecca Regain asked, how do you see that your photography has changed in the last few years, or how is it currently changing? And Alan Bourne asked kind of a similar question, which is, how has your photography evolved over the years and from what starting point?
Mm. Well, one thing that I have noticed is that I'm doing much less photography in recent years. It's just not calling out to me as much as it used to, and I'm doing other things. I have not given up on photography for sure. I still do it. But I also realized that just following the same old route, just staying in my rut, was not really working for me. I could still go out and I can still make, good, quote unquote, good photographs. But the experience of it is not the same. And I'm constantly thinking about other things that I want to do. And so I realized that I have to consciously make room for some of these other things. And not all of them are definitive. There's some things that I know I want to learn, some things that I know I want to read, some things that I know I want to try to do. But then I also realized that it's really time for me to look outside of that, to put some of the familiar things in my life on hold for a bit and just see what else is out there that might be interesting. And I've done that several times throughout my life. But it seems to me that given the transitions in my life, it was a good juncture to say, okay, let's look at everything and figure out where I want to go from here. So kind of figure out my new normal, as the term goes. But when I do photograph, I don't know if that's a necessarily change or if that's more of an evolution. I'm not as interested in obvious aesthetics or in epic images. I'm looking for more at mindful and thoughtful images, things that are unusual, things that are personal, things that are more directly tied with my moods and my thoughts at the time, even negative moods. So not necessarily limiting myself to producing quote unquote pretty pictures, and certainly not intended for popularity or sales. That is not valuable.
Indeed. Yeah. And I think that takes a lot of curiosity, that takes a lot of courage. Openness to experience is something that you've talked extensively about before.
Yeah, and just to touch on Alan's question, from what starting point, it's kind of hard for me to put a definitive starting point on that. I've been photographing for well over 40 years now, and I would estimate it took me about maybe 10 plus years just to get out of the mode of just first of all learning the craft and doing documentary, visually appealing work for the sake of making, appealing photographs, and to start thinking more in terms of being creative and expressive, and to make photography, or to tie photography more strictly to experience, rather than just to check things off the list. um, and so, yeah, like I said, it ties into curiosity and openness to experience. Um, and I mean, those are things that I've been writing about for a lot of years, but I think it's always worth talking about them more, if not for no other reason that I know even I need to remind myself of them sometimes. So just because I wrote about it and just because I teach it and just because I talk about it doesn't mean that I do it perfectly myself. So I sometimes need to give my own behind a little kick.
Well, I mean it takes a balance, right? Like when you get into these situations where, maybe things aren't working. They don't feel the same as they used to. They're not bringing the same amount of fulfillment. Like you want to put the effort in because you're like you don't want to give up, but at some point you don't want to bang your head against the wall either, right? So, like
Right.
and
Absolutely. And
that's where the curiosity comes in, right?
it is, and it's not just banging my head against the wall, but I think, if I'm going to put a word on it, which is a word that actually philosophers have used, is like the worst thing that can happen, it's boredom. I absolutely hate being bored. And when I realize that I'm just, as the expression goes, phoning it in, when things are too easy, it doesn't really matter how good the resulting photographs are. When I feel even a little bit bored, I just get this light going off in my head, just saying, you got to try something else. You got to do something else. You got to stop doing that.
What is this B word you're using? Yeah. I mean, there's too many exciting things to discover in the world. And I guess for me, like knowing that we'll never discover it all, right? Like it's in this endless journey. And you never know where it's going to take you. You never know.
Actually, let me stop you right there, because I think one of the most important parts about this journey is that it's not endless and that we know how it ends. And so you got to make the most of it.
We do know how it ends,
Yeah.
but in the meantime,
Yeah.
all right. So, with that, you said you're photographing less. Do you feel like this was a conscious choice or just simply an awareness you're now having about an evolution in your creative journey?
Well, it's a conscious choice that followed from awareness. So, keep talking about hindsight. I like to every now and then just reflect on what I'm doing, what I have been doing, what I should be doing. And so little by little, I started to realize with this benefit of hindsight that I just wasn't feeling photography as passionately as before. So I realized that when I do feel like photographing, it does feel very meaningful, very intensive, very intense. But it doesn't happen as often as it used to be. And that's okay. I'm not concerned about that. I have a lot of other interests and a lot of other ways to fill my time in meaningful ways. But it was very obvious to me that if I just kept doing what I was doing before, which was very satisfying, uh, I would get to that B word pretty quickly.
Well, and you and I have had this conversation, and I know I talk with my workshop participants about this. Sometimes creativity just doesn't fit in the rectangular box that the camera manufacturers give to us. And one of the things that I'm finding, I'm kind of in the same place as you are right now. Photography has not brought as much fulfillment as it used to. It doesn't mean I don't like photography. It doesn't mean I'm giving up on it. It's just that like right now there's other directions, like for music, for example, like just being able to explore these other things, it feels like I'm gaining more insight about my own photography by not really focusing on my photography. Does that make sense? Like you're not,
Yeah.
it's just being an
Yeah.
artist, right? It's being a
It does, and
human.
yeah, tying it back to your previous question is it's not awareness about photography, it's really awareness about your life. It's really an awareness that, there are other questions to ask. There are potentially other things that could add more richness, more meaning to your life. And it doesn't mean that you have to abandon one thing and switch to another, but make room for other things.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably more complicated than this, but ultimately, when I feel stuck, I just assume I'm out of ideas, and that's
Mhm.
just my trigger to go be more curious about other stuff. Like,
Yeah.
just go try something new, try something different. So
But, in my mind, everything is complicated. So.
I know. Well, all right, guy, we only have 90-ish minutes.
All right.
All right, I'm going to go off script, and because David Masuda has a question, Guy, could you expand on how you've come to understand the relationship between creating photographs and writing?
Okay. Well, hi, David. It's good to see you here. Um, so I think I actually mentioned that in one of my earlier books, maybe in More Than a Rock, is that I realized that I've actually liked writing or gotten serious about writing before I became a photographer. I remember, very early, I think in high school when we started learning how to write essays. I was just addicted. It was weird because everybody else hated it. But I just fell in love with this act of writing when I realized that, you can just put the structure around an idea and then just start filling things in and it just flowed out of my head. And I just love doing it. And so I've never stopped doing it. And then I discovered photography, and then photography became extremely exciting. And in time, after doing both of them for long enough time, at first I thought they're just different means of expression, different media to express myself. So I was the common denominator. But then I realized that they actually are different in some important ways. And I think the way that I explained it in the book is that I think photography for me is a way to express things that, as the psychologist Rollo May characterized it, things that ensue out of encounters. So when I encounter
Yeah.
things in the world outside of me, photography just feels like a very natural way for me to express something about those encounters. Whereas writing is a little bit different. Writing is almost completely inner directed for me. So I get random ideas, not necessarily inspired by any particular event. And then I contemplate and I think about them and I overthink them. And then I feel like writing about it. And as I write about it, I think about it more. So I think writing really helps me explore more of my inner self, whereas photography is more reactive for me. So for me, that was an important distinction because I no longer thought of them as just complementary media or media for just expressing myself, but expressing different things of myself in different worlds.
Excellent. Did you have a passage you wanted to read here? Page 48, I think you said.
Yes, and the reason that I picked that is because I knew that these questions would come out. Well, you're doing less photography, you've given up on photography, and so on. But I just wanted, yes, I just wanted emphasize that I still love photography, and when photography happens, it's absolutely beautiful and exciting and expressive, and everything that it always has been for me, it still is. Uh, and so I want to read a passage where I end up actually making a photograph, despite most of this book being about experiences that are detached from photography. Well, don't involve actually making photographs. So I wanted to read that piece just to, and this is from an article. What's the title of this article? Okay, so this is an article called Winter Camp Soliloquy. So that was camping out in the desert in winter when it's extremely cold. Uh, and so I'm going to skip most of I just take you through a stream of consciousness as I just go exploring through some canyon, in the freezing cold of winter all alone out in the desert. And so I'm going to fast forward you to the end of this day. And this is what I read at the end of the day. Storm clouds drift in the sky as the sky darkens, the gap amongst them filled with dots of light, photons emitted long before I existed from stars trillions of miles away, dozens or even hundreds of years by my clock, no time at all by theirs, in flight. Recognizable constellations, Orion, Taurus, Ursa Major, strengthened my sense of being home, familiar, predictable, welcoming. Finally, the cold and the pangs of hunger turned my attention to dinner making. I realized on this cold and silent winter night, alone in the desert, with no evidence of human existence inside, gazing into the vast celestial tapestry above, that the most profound and memorable moments of life for me have not been moments of happiness. They have been moments of deep contemplation, tinged with fatalism, melancholy, and nostalgia in wild, solitary places. What makes these moments so full of life for me is not hope for or expectations of some rosy future or whatever changes it may bring, but gratitude for being alive right there and then, surrounded by beauty and mystery, filled with a sense of peace. I owe this mood largely to feeling safe and separate from my own species. To be sure, there are many things in the world I may be concerned about if I gave them too much thought, things in other places and other times, things already past or yet to occur. But right now, none of it matters unless I choose for it to matter. It seems to me that life is too short to try to fit too many things into it, to slice the pie so thinly that no part of it can be fully savored and appreciated slowly and mindfully. And I apologize, Colleen, I'm reading the wrong passage. I'm in the
Nope, you're
desert.
good. That's
Yeah.
okay. We're on. I will clarify. You're on page 34 this
All
time.
right. I am on
You're
page 34. Well, let me finish this one then. I'm in
yeah,
the desert.
absolutely.
Yeah, a storm is coming. I'm warm and fed. Time to pour the tequila and light an after dinner cigar. Perhaps listen to some music before retiring into the warm softness of a heavy sleeping bag. I may fall asleep, or I may not. The world of dreams offer little over this reality to tempt me. Right now, there is nowhere else I'd rather be and nothing else I'd rather do. Right now is about right now. The moon rises above the cliffs, surrounded by an iridescent aura, lighting the dissipating storm clouds. I step out into the cold to make a photograph, and I put the photograph on that page 35. So that's
35.
the ending of that day. And again, just to emphasize that I still very much do enjoy photography, and I practice it very seriously, and I get a lot of value from it. I just don't do it as often as I used to.
I I mean, from this page in your book, again, this was from 34.
Sure.
You talked about my favorite thing, which is pie. So, and I appreciate this metaphorical reference to pie. While we're here, what is your favorite flavor of pie?
You know, uh, like as a general rule, I don't have one favorite in anything. So it'll probably be easier for me to tell you what kinds of pies I don't like. I generally don't like the taste of cow pies.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, big vegetarian. I also don't eat meat pies, but pretty much everything else was just fine.
Okay, we'll go with that. We'll go with that. Well, on a more serious note, in reading this passage, you're obviously in a very beautiful moment. Like it's very
Mhm.
beautiful. Um,
Absolutely.
we have a audience member question, and I hope that I pronounce this name correctly. Shawshank Rachirla? Rachirla? How does one be present while also balancing the need for future planning? Because you're very present in this moment.
Mhm.
What
Uh,
about future planning?
okay, so let me touch on that a little bit. And I think it's Shashank, is that correct?
Shashank. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no,
Yep.
actually, he wrote me an email earlier today, so I recognize the name.
Perfect.
So,
Welcome.
uh, so one thing I think is worth mentioning is that there is no one right answer for every person. My balance is not necessarily anybody else's balance. So my balance is a result of my personality. I am by nature not a planner. I like to leave things open-ended. I like to leave room for discoveries and epiphanies and adventures. And that might not be true for someone who is more, I don't know, risk averse than I am, or for somebody who enjoys different things than I do. So I suggest that for every individual person, the finding that balance is really a matter of learning by trial and error. There is no fixed answer, and I assume that that's something that's also going to change depending on the day, depending on the year, depending on the stage of life that you are. So I think just the key to it is a lot of self-examination and willingness to course correct. Just try something that seems right. Do it till it feels like you're overdoing it, and try to course correct, try to find a different balance. Eventually you'll find something, but it's also important to recognize that failure is an inevitable part of any creative endeavor. You have to try to find out if it works or if it doesn't work. And also ask yourself honestly just how much planning is really effective for you. The further you try to plan, the less effective it is because there are a lot more factors that you can predict. Obviously having plans and sticking to plans can be very comforting, where you kind of know what tomorrow will bring, but it also has a downside, which is you block out some possibilities. You block out, or at least diminish, your willingness to reconsider and to take risks and to replan and to deviate from the plan. So my suggestion is just keep plan to the absolute necessary minimum, to the point where they are effective. When you're trying to do something complex, obviously you need a plan, but don't go too far with it, and always, keep your goals open-ended. What happens if something doesn't go according to plan? What will you do? And I think that capacity to readjust your plan, or to deviate from your plan, or even to go on some experiences without any plan and just see what happens, I think those are, at least for me, very important things. So for me, that balance is very much to keep planning to the absolute necessary minimum. But again, I'm on those rankings, of the psychological rankings of openness to experience, I pretty much on all of these traits, I score in the extremes, either extremely low or extremely high. And on openness, I score extremely high. On the other hand, I score extremely low on a personality trait called conscientiousness, which is the ability to stick to goals and to be organized.
Plan,
And
but
those things
plan.
I don't do well at all. And so it fits my personality to just say, well, today I'm going to leave the house, and I think might going to go to that place and see what happens. And that's as much of a plan as I'm willing to make. And sometimes I'll change my mind while I'm driving to the place and decide to go somewhere else. So for me, that's the balance. I'm sure it'll be different for other people, but the point is to self-examine and to realize, or to determine what amount of planning is appropriate for you specifically.
And I think having confidence, knowing that whatever you end up doing, um, it's either going to work out or you're going to learn and you'll figure it out. But you do have to have a lot of confidence. I mean, there's risk taking involved in this, but you have to have confidence in your being that you're going to figure it out as things
Right.
happen.
And confidence also comes with experience. It might be very scary
Right.
the first time and you figure it out, and then it's scary. It's a little less scary the next time and you figure it out, and then you realize, you know what, in time you gain enough skill, and you realize that things have a way of working out, and that you gain more trust in yourself and in your abilities.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to go off script again and entertain a question from our audience member, Gerald Zoltman. Does future hindsight differ from imagination, defined as picturing that which is absent but belongs in your thinking or work?
Hmm. Let me read that more carefully. Picturing that which is absent but belongs in your thinking of work. I think I have a little bit of I think there's something missing from that definition, which is that time scale. So for me, future hindsight means asking today what my future self might regret, or might think I should have done differently, given the information that I had, given the opportunities that I had. So I think picturing and visualizing what is absent is absolutely very, very important. Visualization can be a great way of motivating yourself to do things. Also, we know from experiments that visualizing successful outcomes actually increases the odds of achieving those outcomes. So I think those are very important things. But for me, I'd like to think think that, hey, I'm about to do something, or I'm considering doing something, or, I'm pretty comfortable doing something. What if 20, 30 years from now, when I'm old and can barely move, and I'm thinking about, that day when I thought about doing that and then I decided not to do it, or that decision that I made because it was convenient and ended up, being different. Should I have done that, or should I not have done that? I want to avoid those regrets, those future regrets. And for me, that's what future hindsight is. Consider yourself as an older, wiser person, but without the opportunities that you have today. Looking back, and in hindsight, what do you feel you should have done or should not have done?
And since you brought it up, or at least touched on it here, I'm going to also jump to Thomas Coverdale's question. Does the concept of photographic vision, which we talk about having a vision, like having, visualization, does vision play a role in your photographic philosophy?
Uh, I would say a qualified yes, and I think by vision, the term is a bit ambiguous, so maybe, if someone wants to
Yeah.
provide a more strict definition, I can address that. But for me, vision can be both a blessing. It can also be a trap if it locks you into a certain way of
Right.
thinking. If it primes you to always consider the same outcome in a given situation. If it limits the range of possibility that you consider, that's something that is known as divergent thinking, which is how creative ideas come about. Is to be able to consider as many possible outcomes in real time at the point of decision. And if you have a vision that you consider as your style or as your general attitude, or something that you expect to come out of your efforts, then you might sabotage the
Yeah.
range of possibilities. That's in psychology. That's called your flexibility of coming up with divergent ideas.
And when I think of visualization, I think of training your brain. So building the muscle memory, not necessarily holding on to a vision that you're locked into. Specifically, if we're talking about photography,
Mhm.
being in the field and being like open to experience, being open to the spontaneity, but also having that kind of history of practicing, visualizing, and picture, like, how am I going to approach this? How would
Mhm.
this work? How would that work? The
Sure.
joke that I like to make is you don't want to be thinking about what ISO and what you're responding to and why when the
Yeah,
Jaguar
yeah.
runs across the street under a double rainbow. Like you don't want to be thinking about like you want to be in that moment, right?
Mhm.
And so all of your past experience photographing things like rainbows and jaguars and streets, like all of that comes into play in the actual end photograph.
Yeah.
But I'm not like you're like not thinking about it, right?
I should just mention that there's actually an article in this book called the Pitfalls of, I think, Visualization or Pre-visualization.
It was great.
And one of the points that I make in that is that visualization in itself is not good or bad. What might make
Right.
it good or bad is when you do it. If you visualize before you leave the house, before you have an encounter, before you have an experience, then you might lock yourself into an outcome before you even feel what it is that you want to express. And I think that's a bad thing. But if you begin to visualize at the point that you have an encounter, at the point that you have the experience, at the point that you have this epiphany, this moment of inspiration, then start visualizing, okay, what can I do with this, with what I'm feeling right now, with what I want to express right now. Then visualization can become extremely useful. And again, going back to some of the science, this is the point where you switch from divergent thinking, which is generating ideas, to convergent thinking, which is, now that I've settled on the idea, how do I put that into practice? What are the different, knowing my craft, how do I put that? How do I create something out of it? How do I make it reality? How do I create an object out of that, an artifact?
Yeah, it's I thought that particular essay you did a really excellent job of explaining that and tying it to sort of my photographic philosophy follows the Wallace model of creativity and preparation, filling your brain with knowledge and ideas, and incubation, and like putting things together and how you apply that. I thought you did a really nice job on that particular essay. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so we will move on to another audience member question. Kelvin Knox. Qualia are the private subjective qualities of conscious experience. How do qualia fit with future hindsight?
Well, hey, Kel. if you guys aren't familiar with Kel's work, he does some very, very interesting work in Tasmania and extremely creative stuff. So I recommend.
Amazing.
Yep. So, all right. So, quality. I love this term. Let me just explain,
I do love this term. I love qualia. It's like one of the coolest words in the English language. Yeah.
Yeah, let me just explain briefly what it means. It comes from neuroscience, and in neuroscience, qualia are dimensions or aspects of inner experience, and that's also tied into consciousness. So, according to some theories, consciousness means having qualia, means having inner experiences, and those can be inner experiences that we all share and can explain to each other easily. Things like, my leg hurts, I feel pain, right? That's qualia. That's an inner experience of pain. And if I explain to you, my leg hurts and I have a pain, behind my knee or something like that, you might not know exactly 100% how it feels to me internally, but you can probably relate to it pretty well. But then there are some qualia that we can't really share that are entirely internal. One of the common examples that I use in neuroscience is, let's say you look at something red and you have an experience of redness. How do I know that the way that I experience red is the way that you experience red? There is
You,
no way for us to know that, right? We might experience red in different things. What I visualize as red, you might visualize a completely different color that you've always called red, and we have no way of knowing if those are the same. Uh, so anyway, so qualia comes from neuroscience. It's related to consciousness. So it's qualities of inner experience. So let me go back to the question. So yeah, there are private and subjective qualities of conscious experience. So how do they fit into future hindsight? I would say that first of all, I mean they define the way that you perceive and experience the world, and so knowing those things about yourself, you can guess what are some things that you might regret. But I think more practically, in the way that you live right now, it really factors into creativity. And I've recently read a book by, I like to read books, science book about creativity as soon as they come out. And there's one that came out just recently. It's called The Creativity Choice by Dr. Zorana Pringle. And I found this passage that I thought would answer this question pretty well. And she recommends that when you have qualia, when you have feelings, when you have emotions, you have to be very, very deliberate about qualifying exactly what they are to yourself, not
mm,
necessarily explain them to other people. And then once you make yourself very conscious of these things, try to find ways to apply them in your creative work. And the reason that you explain it to yourself, because you can't really share everything with other people. But
right.
most people experience their emotions as something in the background. It's just something that bubbles up in your mind, and hey, I'm feeling whatever, happy now. I'm feeling a little sad now. I'm feeling nostalgic now, and it's not something that you deliberately say, okay, I'm feeling nostalgic now. This defines what I'm feeling. What can I do with it? And she recommends, Dr. Pringle recommends in the book. I'm just going to read a couple of passages. She
Sure.
writes. To use the information inherent in your feelings for creative purposes, the first challenge is to accurately and precisely identify what you are experiencing. I'm going to skip a couple of paragraphs ahead. And that's the conclusion. She says, sometimes just identifying an emotion clarifies what we need to do. If we are confused, we need to learn more about something. When we know that frustration alerts us that we've hit a wall, we apply this knowledge by making the decision to try something else, scale the wall, walk around it, build a ladder, discontinue what we're doing. Boredom, the B word, signals
Ooh.
that our surroundings are not stimulating or meaningful. We can do something else or try to look at what we are doing in a fresh way. Perhaps there is a purpose to what we are doing after all. Anger warns us about an injustice and not just to address it. So in other words, what she's saying is try to be consciously mindful of your qualia to a point where you can actually characterize it and find ways to put it to use in your work, in your decisions, and not just acknowledge that you're feeling something.
So paying attention to yourself is important.
Yeah, but also pulling some of that subconscious feeling, some of that subconscious inner experience into a conscious acknowledgement that this is what you are feeling, that this is something that you need to do something about.
Excellent. We're going to stay with kind of this future hindsight exploration. Robert Younger asked, it seems that your application of future hindsight is focused predominantly on precluding future regret. Doesn't it also apply to perhaps celebrating a decision or action?
That's a tough one for me to answer, but the reason might be a little convoluted. So, I mean, yes, obviously you should celebrate decisions or actions that have turned out well, and yeah, you should regret the ones that didn't turn out so well because that's how the first one is what gives meaning to your life, and the second one is how you learn to make better choices. So I think in that sense that there is definitely there are good practical reasons to celebrate your successes and to learn from your failures, but I think future hindsight, the way that I think about it is more, really more in terms of regret. It's more in terms of like not feeling that I've wasted any of the gifts of time and life and skill and experience and opportunities that I've been given. And, Colleen, you and I have talked previously about some of the influence of existentialist philosophy about it, and how we make choices. And that's really something that makes people very uncomfortable about existentialism, because part of the existentialist premise is you have to consider every option that's available to you. And most people, when you tell them that, don't even realize that they don't consider all the options that are really available to them, right? If you're sitting in an office and then you're bored in your job and you're thinking, maybe I should take a vacation and go do something fun, you're really not considering all your options, right? An existentialist will tell you, hey, have you considered the fact that you can just walk out of the office right now, cash out your bank account, hop on a flight, leave everything that you know right now and go live on a beach in Tahiti, right? That is an option that's open to you. And I mean, that's an extreme case, but really there are so many options that are available to us that we just by rote, just by habit, we don't even think there are possibilities. And every now and then, some of these might actually make the biggest difference, the biggest positive difference in life. We might not even realize it.
So are we going to do our next webinar from Tahiti? Is that is that what I'm hearing?
I didn't say you're going.
Oh, wait a minute. What? It is an option.
It is an option.
Oh, I love existentialism. I mean, you and I talk a lot about it. It's so much fun. In the chat, Michael Griswold shared a Francis Bacon quote that is great. It's all so meaningless. We may as well be extraordinary. For me, we might as well fill our time with as many cool things by our definition, right? As many things as we want. Like use your time wisely, right? I mean, you talk about this, so.
Well, that quote is where the title of my book sort of comes from.
Oh,
Yeah.
perfect. All right. All right. So when we talk about photography, you said you were photographing less. And I mean, this may be a silly question, but given the amount of time you've invested in photography, how do you view your current state of being, your current transition? Do you feel like we're in future hindsight right now? Do you feel like you've wasted any time with photography? Do you carry any regrets?
No, of course not. I mean, if I did, I would have failed my own idea of future hindsight. No, I don't regret any of it. Photography has enriched my life in ways beyond anything I could begin to imagine when I first started it. I met my closest friends through photography. Photography liberated me from a job that I didn't like. It allowed me to live this life that I live now. So I can't begin to overestimate how much photography has done for me. I absolutely don't regret any of it. And I keep mentioning my obsessive aversion to feeling that my time is wasted. And
Right.
so I absolutely do not regret it. I absolutely do not believe that I've wasted it. And I would not be the person that I am now. I would not have the life that I have now. I would not be living where I live now. Some of the most consequential things in my life would not have happened if it wasn't for photography.
And it'd also be kind of weird to have a book called Another Day Not Wasted, right?
That is very weird. Yeah.
It'd be weird,
Okay.
yeah. Well, but I think some of the things that you said though about like your friendships and all of the things that turned out in perhaps different ways than you ever considered, back to Robert's question about does it also apply to celebrating a decision or action? Like sometimes you're setting yourself up, not you don't know what's going to happen, and sometimes what actually does end up happening is way better than you could have even
Oh,
planned in the first place. I mean that's the story of my life, right?
yeah.
And you have examples of that as well, but it's not necessarily celebrating a decision, but kind of being open to even great things that might
Yeah.
transpire.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, when it goes way better than you expected, that's great, but it can also go way worse than you expected. But the
Oh,
point
sure.
is, that doesn't really matter for the
Don't
topic
regret it.
of regret, right? You have done, quote unquote, we have made the right choice based on the information that you had, the opportunities that you have. You've had the courage to make a choice, and not all choices are going to be successful. But that doesn't have to do with regret. You could say, I wish I hadn't done that, because it ended up badly. But if you could not have
Sure.
known that, then there's nothing to regret.
Yeah, well, kind of in this vein, on page 18, you offered a Mary Oliver quote, and it's one of my favorites. It reads, "The most regretful people on earth are those who felt the call to creative work, who felt their own creative power restive and uprising, and gave to it neither power nor time." Can you talk about how it feels to recognize what your creative work is? Like, how do you know your own power?
So in some ways you don't, and you can't really know your own power until you try to do something. And even if your early efforts fail, and even, as long as the calling is still there, you keep trying. That's the quality that psychologists call grit. Uh, I don't know if I can do it, but I know that it's worth trying. I know that I have the opportunity to try. I know that I will regret not taking the opportunity to try, even if I don't know that it's within my power. I want to find out. Uh, and also, when we say creative work, and I don't know if that's the sense that Mary Oliver meant, I have the sense that she at least would agree with that, is when we think of creative work, it's a little too easy to think my creative work is photography and my creative work is poetry or music. But
Right.
really, the one creative work for every one of us, that is the totality of all of it, is we create ourselves. We create the lives that we want to live. We create the experiences that we want to have. We create our personalities. That is really the creative work for anybody. And so the media is, I think, a secondary concern. Your life and then your
Right.
personality, they dictate what you need to express, but they don't dictate how you should express it. So if you get good enough in a given medium, whether it's photography or painting, or, which, I feel like I have gotten to a point, like I said, where I can make a competent photograph, any given day. That's no longer the
Competent. Yeah.
challenge from, but when you get to the point where you have gotten that degree of control over your medium, you also realize the limitations of the medium, the things that it won't let you do, no matter how much you try. You just keep running into the same limitations. And that might be an indication that, maybe there are other ways, because your experiences are the most important thing. And if in photography you can't really fully express your experiences, or if writing doesn't completely capture your experiences, then maybe there are other ways to do it. And I think, you should heed that call. If you feel like Mary Oliver writes, if you feel that creative power uprising, you got to give it time. You got to give it your power. You got to at least give it some attention, give it a chance.
Yep. Absolutely. Kind of in that same vein, on page 47, you wrote, "If you feel that photography has become less satisfying to you today than it used to be, whether due to technological advancements, the dynamics of online socializing, the bloativating of influencers, or any other reason, and despite the medium not having lost any of its historical capacities, and in fact gaining some, it is fair to say that it is not because photography is dying. More likely, it is because in the age of mass media and virtual socializing, things like creativity, individualism, qualities of an inner experience, the raw ingredients of inspiration and artistic expression are dying." So, given that, what advice would you give to photographers or artists who may not feel satisfied with their practice of photography or their chosen media?
So just to put this in context, that's from an essay that starts with, several times in my career, I've read different diatribes that declare that photography is dead for some reason. Whether, people said photography is dead when, digital became as capable as film, and that was the death of photography. And if you look historically, when film came about and started replacing glass plates, there were photographers that thought it would be the death of photography. And there's nothing that I can't do in photography today that I could do when I started it. So nothing is dead. I can still do everything that I ever wanted to do in photography. I can still do right now. So that's the gist of the article. So the point is, no matter how much the technology of photography changes, no matter how much the social aspects of photography are changing, those might have implications. If you're a professional, for example, then yeah, you have professional implications. If whatever AI or something can satisfy the same demand that you're catering to more cheaply and easily, then that's something that you should worry about. But when it comes to creative expression, when it comes to artistic expression in photography now is more alive than it ever was. You have more possibilities, better equipment, better ways of getting your work out there, better ways of printing your work. All these things now are better and easier. So really, the limitation is not anything having to do with photography. It has to do with your attitude toward it. So my first advice is, if you're a young photographer that is excited about photography, don't lose that excitement just because people are whining online about things that they don't like. There is nothing in photography that you can't do today that you could do when you started that you can't do right now. But also at the same time, don't be afraid to question yourself and to try new things. Don't assume that other people have the right answers for you or that everything else has already been done. And certainly don't assume that popularity implies notoriety. Just because somebody said something
Mm.
doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. Uh, and I guess that sort of brings me to well, maybe sort of a story is when I made the choice to become a professional photographer. There were very specific ways of how you could earn a living in photography, and none of them appealed to me. I didn't want to sell stock photography. I didn't want to do advertising. I didn't want to do commercial photography. I liked the idea of selling prints, but even that wasn't much. And today, all of these are dead, right? So
Of course.
at the time, I wanted to be a photographer's photographer. I wanted to create things for other photographers. I wanted to help other photographers find inspiration and excitement and then ways to enjoy and appreciate photography more. And I remember over and over professional photographers that I spoke with every time told me that's not going to work. Photographers never buy other photographers' work. And fast forward to today, photographers are pretty much the only one who buy other photographers' work. Uh, so don't let these things dissuade you. If you feel that you're on something, if you feel that there's a chance that you could do something that is truly meaningful and truly satisfying, that there's at least a chance that you might be successful at it, do it.
Well, even if you're not going to be successful at it, at least you're going to learn something about it, right? Like
Absolutely.
answer that call. Like,
Absolutely. But then on the other hand, if you've been doing photography for a while and you find yourself kind of stuck in a rut, don't be afraid to ask yourself, and am I on the right track? If you enjoy what you do, then the answer will be yes, and you will feel validated and you can continue down your course and that'll be great. You will get more fuel. But if the answer comes back as a maybe or a no or I'm not sure, don't ignore that. If something else is calling you, don't feel any allegiance to the medium, to a way of doing things. Your allegiance should be to the quality of your own experience, to the quality of your own life, to creating the best self that you can. And if that means that you now have to consider other possibilities, why not?
why not? Would you would you say the same for folks who are feeling satisfied with their photographic practices? Like, what encouragement would you have for people who are like totally loving photography right now? Like, they're
That's
digging it.
great. That's absolutely great. And like I said, if you ask yourself, am I on the right track? And you the only thing your brain can comes up with is absolutely yes, then you feel validated. Keep going by all means.
Perfect.
Just don't assume that will always be the answer, right?
Right.
People change, things change, the world change, circumstances change. You learn things, you evolve, you grow, you become different things. So keep asking the question, and as long as the answer comes back yes, great, keep going. But if it comes back something else, don't ignore that.
I love that. Yeah. My life, the way I'm kind of trying to live my life is if it's fun and or if I'm learning, I keep doing it. If I'm not having fun and I'm not learning, then I need to stop and go do something else fun and learn something new. So yeah, that
Yeah,
totally.
just maybe qualify that because the process or some parts of the process are not always fun. But
Oh, yeah,
if
no, I have a very broad definition of fun.
yeah, so like like
Type
that old
2.
song goes, keep your eyes on the prize. If the prize looks
Right.
sweet, then keep pursuing it, even if you have to make some sacrifices and go through some difficulties.
I'm a big fan of type 2 fun. Like type 1 fun, type 2 fun, maybe even type 3 and 4 fun. I don't know. It's very broad, right? All right, so on to the next question. On page 69, you challenge the reader to ask, what will people think if we betray our public identity and seemingly those who may consider us as allies, colleagues, or fellow travelers in those forms of success? Would you want to read that full passage for us?
Sure. So that passage actually starts at the end of page 68, so I'll start there.
Oh, okay, sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Here goes. When
I
others
have a
see us as
question. I have a question about this after you're done. So go ahead.
after, okay.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
others see us as successful, we intuitively identify ourselves with whatever form of success gains us notoriety, making it an aspect of our personality, something that must follow I am. I am a famous photographer, a great boss, an accomplished business person, and so on. We rarely stop to ask ourselves whether these things, which may have seemed important in our youth, are truly who we are, or to what degree we pursued them because of convenience or outside influences, and may at last be free to set aside in favor of more personally meaningful pursuits. What will other people think if we change course, if we quote unquote betray our public identity and seemingly those who may consider us as allies, colleagues, or fellow travelers in those forms of success? When pressed, we may fall back to self-comforting rationalizations. If I could start over, I would have done things differently, but I can't. No, we can't start over, but in many cases, we can start anew. Like all choices, it will have consequences. Yet, the same is true if we fail to choose. If we find our professional pursuits uninteresting, we may further punish ourselves by holding on to them with yet more years of disinterest. If we come to doubt former beliefs, we may further punish ourselves by persisting in our errors. Worse, we may encourage others, if only by example, to pursue unsatisfying paths. Professional and financial success brings with it freedom, the freedom to stay the course and rest on our laurels, and also the freedom to change course. To know how to free oneself is nothing, wrote André Gide. The arduous thing is to know what to do with one's freedom. Whatever it be, whether art or nature, that has inscribed in us this condition of living by reference to others, it does us much more harm than good, wrote the self-obsessed philosopher Michel de Montaigne. We defraud ourselves out of what is actually useful to us in order to make appearances conform to common opinion. We care less about the real truth of our inner selves than about how we are known to the public. I have too much to lose, you may think, but perhaps on occasion it may be useful to think of all the things I have to lose, which is the greater loss. There may be little you can do about years you feel you've wasted, but what about the ones you haven't yet?
Hmm.
And I want to follow that, if you don't mind. There's a passage from a philosopher who passed away a couple of years ago, unfortunately, named Daniel Dennett. He wrote a book called Breaking the Spell, and he specifically talked about this feeling that you might be, betraying your tribe. So, if you decide to change course or change opinion. So he wrote, those who feel guilty contemplating, quote unquote, betraying the tradition they love by acknowledging their disapproval of elements within it should reflect on the fact that the very tradition to which they are so loyal, the quote unquote, eternal traditions introduced to them in their youth, is in fact the evolved product of many adjustments, firmly but delicately made by earlier lovers of the same tradition. So what he's saying is no matter what you feel loyalty to today, it wasn't always like that. Other people have had other traditions and they dared to quote unquote betray their traditions to give your tradition a chance. And there's nothing that says that the tradition that you are loyal to today is the absolute last, final, best one. There's always room for more.
So yeah, my question kind of ties around that. How, because you've done this, how have you set aside these outside noises, these influences, these traditions to achieve the level of freedom that you have? How might one go about facing this sense of betrayal?
Um, that's hard for me to answer because I think I'm in somewhat of an advantageous position as having grown up being an outsider and that introvert type. I've always felt like I had to be self-sufficient and I had to consider my own my own well-being and my own sense of satisfaction and meaning. And so in a sense, I've kind of grown up with this attitude where I would take other people's opinion, but I never accept them as gospel. I always want to match them against what I know, what I feel, what makes me different from them. Uh, and I think that's an attitude that's worth cultivating. I won't say that I've, one day I woke up and decided to make this huge change from being a people pleaser to being my own independent thinker. It's just something that's always been part of my personality, but I still think it's worth doing is putting things in perspective. Like I said in the article, consider what the greater loss is, whether it's the loss of that perception of other people, cheering you on doing what you're doing, or whether it's the loss of you doing what you actually want to do, which is the greater loss.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to jump into some additional reader questions, and we're kind of talking about the changes in photography. And I think on a lot of people's minds, we had a number of questions about artificial intelligence, AI, and so we have a question from I'm gonna butcher the name, and I apologize in advance. Bruce, is it Finocchio? Asked what the future of photography and truth with the advent of AI. Has it been fundamentally altered? And then we also have a question from Larry Meyer, which is how AI will affect reality and belief in the photos that are being taken. So AI,
Okay, so
go.
I will address the AI and photography topic first, but then just maybe AI in
Okay.
a more general sense later. And I really think that AI didn't really make things that much difference. And if anything, it just made it more obvious that photography and truth are not and have never been synonymous, which has been the case since the medium was invented. And, even before AI, I wrote several articles suggesting that our default attitude must be to never assume without evidence that photographic images represent objective reality. And now we're seeing some of the bad effects of people just taking images for reality, all these deep fakes and then, marketing, not marketing, advertising images that make products look more appealing and desirable than they are. So by blindly trusting that photographs give us a true representation of the world, we have opened ourselves up to all kinds of deceptions. And now AI has made that a lot easier. Now pretty much anyone with a few prompts can produce images that are very deceptive. And so I think the attitude should be always consider every photograph that you see or anything that looks like a photograph that you see in context. If it's a random photograph that you found online by somebody that you don't know much about, don't ever assume that it's real. If you see it, in some respectable publication, and it has the name of a photographer that and that there's some ethical context assigned to it, then you can be reasonably certain that it is a correct representation of reality because there's some liability involved with it. There's a context that tells you this photograph you can trust, and I think that should always be the attitude for any photographic images. But now in the age of AI, I think that's absolutely, obvious that should be the default. You never assume that a photograph is an actual representation of reality unless you have some context to give you that sense. And then, I mean, some things, of course, have been fundamentally altered by AI, but these may be more relevant to the profession of photography.
Mm,
Why would someone pay a human for, I don't know, something like an advertising campaign when an AI can do much more quickly and cheaply and potentially even better? But as I mentioned in this book, and then I've mentioned in other articles before, the one thing that AI can substitute for, and what to me is the primary reason to make photograph or to practice photography the way that I do, is the experience of making photographs.
right,
And
right.
there's just no comparison between sitting at the keyboard and typing prompts and being out in nature and discovering something amazing in the world and being immersed in natural beauty. So those things AI can't do better than human being. There's no way that I can just sit there and type things and look at the screen and then see things that it generates. And yeah, it might generate really beautiful images, but it doesn't generate experiences. And I want to read, I actually have a passage about it in the book. If you don't mind,
Oh,
I'll
sure,
just read that quickly.
sure.
Page 50, I believe. When I'm in my element, I never feel myself a hunter out to stalk and harvest trophies to bring back for fellow
Mm.
tribespeople to feast on. Photography is most rewarding to me as a tool for exploration, discovery, and personal expression. The camera becomes an extension of my senses and my mind as I look closer at and make myself more mindful of the world around me. As I seek beauty and meaning beyond the obvious in both grand scenes and in fine, nuanced details of the natural world, feeling grateful to have such places and experiences available to me to enrich my life and sometimes saddened by the knowledge that for many others they may not be. So, what if AI can make a prettier picture? It can't substitute for these inner experiences. So, for me, that's not even a question.
Yeah.
That's just something that AI can't do. No matter how technically better or cheaper or faster it can do things, it simply cannot give me experience.
And I think it's a great time to ask yourself the question, why are you a photographer? Why are you using photography as a means to express yourself?
Mhm.
And I know for me, that answer has changed over time. I mean, I obviously first started it as a profession, but now it's as a way to express inner ideas and, you know, discover things about the world around me, myself, my art, my craft, and whatnot. um I being out in nature, like those are things that AI is not going to be able to take away from us,
But
the human experience, right?
But I do want to make just a general comment about AI because I think that gets when we start thinking about details like how would AI affect photography, I think we're missing a very troubling bigger picture, which is to think or to worry about how AI might affect photography. That's like worrying that a nuclear bomb might interrupt your nap, right? The effects of AI will
Probably
be
would.
much broader and much more profound than just generating images or chatbots. It'll be enormous. And I think a lot of people are just blindly walking into this future without really considering that very carefully.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, so a couple of more audience questions, especially kind of in this time, this day and age. Leslie McCarthy asks, how do you fuel your creative inspiration? Who are your favorite thought leaders, and how do you continue to expand creativity?
I think I've come to a point now where my inspiration has become self-fueling and self-sustaining, and it wasn't always like that. It took a lot of work, not just work, but getting to a point where you have experienced the rewards of inspiration enough time that your brain just automatically seeks it. Your brain just automatically wants it. Your brain is willing to invest the effort, the time and the effort, and to take the creative risks to experience it over and over again. So if you're familiar with the effect of flow, with that book by Mihai
Sure.
Csikszentmihalyi, he called this type of experiences autotelic. These are experiences that are rewarding in their own right. And once you get to that point where you've experienced that joy of inspiration and creative success enough time, it's I don't want to use the word addictive because it has a negative connotation, but your brain just becomes hungry for it. It just keeps
Right.
looking for it. So I think the trick is to get to that point, and to get there, it's a lot of trial and error, a lot of grit. Just keep going. Uh, and as far as thought leaders, okay, I'm going to hijack a little this question a little bit. I apologize. I prefer to use inspirations rather than the word leaders. Being the individualist that I am, I don't want to be a leader or a follower. The people that inspire me are people who give me new ways of thinking about things, not people who tell me how to do things or people who lead me to things.
Sure.
So people that give me new knowledge, new insight, new possibilities to consider. But ultimately, I always consider it up to me to seek out that wisdom, not to just follow a leader and hope that, something will rub off on me.
Magically happen.
Yes, I have to decide independently what is right for me, what ideas I want to accept, what course I want to pursue. And if I find someone who inspires me, I might borrow or might use some of their ways of
Sure.
thinking or some things that I learned from them. But ultimately, I don't want to follow them. I want to use that in my own way. So with that in mind, I mean, it's hard for me to name people. My inspirations are just people who are wise. People, it might be artists or philosophers or scientists or
Sure.
writers or public intellectual, anyone that has something interesting or insightful to share. And there are way too many to list. and this is where I'm going to hijack because I do want to name two people who just happen to be on the call right now, and one of them is you, Colleen, and the other is my good friend
Oh,
Michael. And both of you have contributed to this book. But the reason that I want to call you out is because a big part of the reason that you are my friend and that you are inspiring to me is that you share this attitude of just being creative and taking risk and following experiences and doing things for what to me seemed like the right reason, the right attitudes, and not just that, being longtime friends. You challenge me to think. I can have conversations and exchanges with you, which I can't do, when I read a book or watch a video. So I just you ask
thank you.
who are the thought leaders, which I hijacked to mean inspiration, which I then hijacked to give a nod to my two friends. I apologize, but
Dog.
the gist of it is that for me, thought leaders or people who are inspiration are people who are wise, and they don't necessarily have to be very popular. They don't necessarily have to be the best of the best. They don't necessarily have to be financially successful. They're just people who give me new wise ways of thinking about things and relating to things that help me make my own choices independently.
And here I thought we were friends just because I make you pie now and then. I
Well,
mean,
yeah, but I mean, I make you pancakes, so.
well, I think, and I appreciate that guy very much. It means a lot to me to hear that from you. I think when you're around people who are willing to do what you're talking about, you get more confidence. Like I know that I have gained confidence in through our friendship and with Michael's friendship and many others on this call. Like when I know that there's other people out there do it, like who are curious, who are taking risks, who are maybe doing something that society just maybe it's not in there, maybe it's not part of the plan and maybe you're just doing something a little different. I know I gain a lot of inspiration from that. So I think that, yeah, I appreciate that very much. Yeah. All right. Let's do a couple of more questions. Gail Scott asked, how do you stay balanced in this world today? Maybe
Um,
it's just finding inspiration.
well, yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of things in the world today that are disconcerting. Whatever your thoughts are about who's right and who's wrong and what needs to happen, not everything is perfect, and maybe more imperfect now than it was in other periods. But for me, the most comforting thing in life is what I call big picture thinking. I'm aware that I'm mortal. I'm aware that I'm only here for a short amount of time. I'm aware that I have opportunities to experience profound things and a lot of beauty. I'm aware of the vastness of existence and how meaningless all of it is in the grand scheme of things. So all these things really help anchor me, just give me that perspective. Um, you know what? Let me read a passage from the book that
Sure.
talks about that.
Sure.
I marked one on page 80. Oops, that's not it. That's the one. So this is about my thoughts about big picture. Um, Understanding, even at a layperson level, the genealogy of existence as we understand it at this point of human history, how interactions among quantum fields may yield the building blocks of matter, how quantum mechanics gives rise to classical laws of physics, how physics gives rise to chemistry, how chemistry gives rise to geology and biology, how biology gives rise to life, and how life gives rise to sensory perceptions, to ecology, to psychology, to emotions, to abstract thinking, to language, to philosophy, to art, and to then consider one's living experience in the context of this vast realm of knowledge. It's to me the most potent solve that I know of for the frustrations, anxieties, and disappointments that may arise in the course of daily living. And so for me, that has been the case for a very long time. When people ask me, the proverbial, do you have a word of advice? I do have one word of advice, and that word is read. And unfortunately, reading has been declining in recent years. There is so much that we can get just from reading some books, just from learning some philosophy, learning some science, learning about how the world works. And all of a sudden, you realize that all things considered, You have a lot to be grateful for just living in this day and age as the person that you are, in the place that you are, and the opportunities you would have. And even if all of it comes to an end at some point, and even if the trends are not looking promising, you still have a lot to be grateful for. And ultimately, everything everything is gonna fizzle away into the cold depth of the universe in a few billion years. So don't take anything too seriously.
Isn't that true? Right? That's perspective. Um, all right, I'm just looking at the time and we're coming up on our 90 minutes here. So we're going to kind of start to wrap things up here. On page 51, you state, but the world is changing. The places I loved are changing, and I am changing. My art must also change. What present foresight or visualizations are you having right now? What are you composing right now? What's coming for you next? Or wait, to use your words on page 90, how adventurous is your soul?
Well, I hope that I've been able to demonstrate, at least to myself and by my own standard, that I've had a pretty adventurous life. I consider myself fortunate and satisfied by that. I guess right now what I'm composing is, as I mentioned, my own new normal. I did not expect to be where I am right now, but I have a lot of opportunities. I have a lot of great things in addition to the challenges. So I'm pretty much starting a new life in a new place. So figuring out, from the most mundane things of how to get things done and who the people around me are and what opportunities I have in my new home and my new landscapes and all the different ways that I can fill my time. But on the other hand, I've also gained a lot of discretionary times, which I already had a lot of them. Sad to admit, not sad to admit, but yeah. I like to catch up on a backlog of things that I always said, someday I should do that. And so I giving myself the opportunity to do that. And
Why not
just
now?
tying back to something that we talked about earlier is adventure is pretty much the antithesis of planning. Advent
Fun,
Adventure
maybe.
starts when
Go.
things don't go according to plan or when situations come up that you couldn't have planned for. So to ask how adventurous your soul is really also to ask how much are you prepared to change your plan or to avoid planning in the first place to give adventure a chance. And so I'm not planning. I'm living.
The people who have been on my workshops before know that I have this quote: the plan is the plan until the plan changes, and the plan changes often. So plan on it.
Well, maybe I should have a talk with those people, having seen how you react when the plans change.
Yeah, I'm in the planning, but we got spreadsheets, but we go off we go off crazy sometimes. Well, so obviously I'm certain that I speak for all of us that we wish you the very best in your new direction and your new normal. What new learnings are you from photography, from your experiences, are you taking with you in your new direction?
I think what I'm taking with me is that same attitude of just being open to experience, just daring to try anything that seems meaningful and constantly learning, constantly reading. So, I've gone on a binge in the last couple of years of trying to, I've always wanted to learn more about poetry and about classical music and about things that have always interested me and I knew something about, but this gives me a chance to just dig deeper into them and I'm taking the opportunities and I don't know where it's going to lead, but it's very satisfying.
That's great to hear. All right. So yeah, we're gonna not have time to go through all of the other questions, but I do want to reiterate how grateful we are that you submitted them, and we have them in the documents, the notes that we have here, and we'll make sure that Guy gets a copy of that, and we'll can address those in future offerings. So, Guy, thank you for this conversation. Really appreciate it. Any last comments before we wrap up and talk about some logistical things here?
Well, I guess I've obviously been dominating the conversation. So what about you, Colleen? What are you up to? What new things
Oh,
are you?
I mean, I'm trying new things. My thing right now is composing music. I'm for me, I'm I am obsessed. I have no musical background, but I have started composing music using a digital audio workstation, a DAW. I am in the middle of composing my second symphony. I just started symphonies earlier this year. First one I did for the Moab Photo Symposium. I think Jennifer and David are online here. Hi, you guys. And yeah, I'm kind of taking all of what you've talked about, future hindsight, living with courage and creativity. It makes absolutely no sense. Like if you look at the course of my life, but at the same time makes entirely perfect sense. And I'm not really sure where it's going, not really sure why I'm doing it other than I know I cannot live without it. And so for me it's again having that confidence and I think when we were just on a podcast with Jack Graham and John Peterson, good friends of ours, and they asked like, well, like you could have done something other than a symphony, and I guess my answer is like, what's like the worst thing that's going to happen? Nobody's going to hear my symphony. I'm going to write a bad note. Like, okay. Like, I think that's like what you're talking about is having that courage and confidence and just, I mean, it is what it is. And some of it is pretty fascinating. So I'm learning about photography from it. I'm learning about art. I'm learning about myself. And that's the part, right? So anyway, yeah.
Better reason can there be?
Right. Right. All right. So, Guy, tell us where, if folks haven't purchased the ebook yet, tell us where we can purchase the ebook.
Well, obviously on our website, guytal.com, or if you prefer to purchase it from Analemma Press, you can also get it there.
From both of our websites, we both have a limited time sale. You're getting $2 off, and it's hopefully that entices you if you hasn't if you haven't. We do have a question from Rocky Sharwell about a print version, and we have gotten a few questions about that. Guy, do you want to talk? You want to address that?
Yeah, I think for me that was mostly a logistical decision. I wanted to get the content out there, and let's be honest, the financial risk and reward of print publishing are not what they used to be. So it's been a very convenient way for me to do it, and we have talked about the possibility if there's enough demand of doing a print edition in the future. So definitely not prepared to commit to it, but maybe.
Maybe, yeah. It's always an option.
Mhm.
All right. So if you would like to see more of Guy's work, guytal.com, pretty simple. If you'd like to see what I'm up to, my website is colleenminiuk.com. We've got some really exciting things out there. We've got workshops, presentations, books. I've got a Grand Canyon rafting trip if anyone wants to live the big life on a river. I also have this amazing online exhibition called Sacred Spaces. I lead photography workshops called Sheography, all women's photography workshops called Sheography, and 16 sheographers have put together their most meaningful work into a gorgeous online exhibition that runs through the end of June. So do check that out. Guy, I think it's a wrap. Thank you so much for your continued inspiration and all the ways that you influence our lives for the better. So keep
Well,
writing.
thank you for the same things, and thank you very much to everybody that for giving us your time this evening and giving us the opportunity to share something of ourselves. So very
Yeah,
rewarding.
thank you. Yeah, I'll just echo what Guy says about spending time with us tonight. Hopefully, you've got some new ideas about future hindsight and where that can maybe take you in your own life. So, with that, we'll sign off. See ya.